Hey everyone, this is Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. Today's review is of the third entry in the Alien series, and like I believe I mentioned before, it was the first entry in the series that I saw. It of course is Alien3, and of course the quadrilogy set. There's a picture of some of it, and there go the dogs, they freaking one in the room. There, happy? You happy, Odie? Oh, you happy you heard the camera on? You're like, yeah, I gotta be in the video. Say hello. Kind of funny considering that the alien in this movie comes from a dog in one version of the, in one cut of the film. So he's like, oh, alien, I gotta be in the movie, I gotta be in it. Sorry, Odie, we don't got an alien suit. If we did, you'd be in it. Yeah, funny considering we do see, they did use a dog for one scene of this, but I'll get to that in a bit. Now, of course, with how successful James Cameron's Aliens was, you knew eventually there was going to be a sequel, and as they mentioned on the second disc in the quadrilogy set for this film, Fox, unlike with the first sequel, they actually wanted to do it, whereas with the first sequel they're like, yeah, we don't know if we'll do a sequel, do a script and we'll see. But this one they're like, yeah, we gotta do a sequel. So they hired multiple people to do it. First, of course, we got the famous William Gibson script, which is the only one of these scripts that I've actually read myself, and I have to say, why didn't they go with this film? I mean, you guys remember I did a whole video kind of ranting on it. It was a perfect script. It was a successor to what James did with Aliens. It had more firefights, and it had something new, the whole biological thing. It's like what happens if you combine the aliens with the thing. It was cool. It would have been a great film. Would have had a lot of good special effects. Would have good action scenes. Would have had pretty good acting, I bet. Michael King would be cool in an alien film, but I meant Michael Biehn. Michael Biehn would have kicked some serious ass, along with Lance Hendrickson, among others, whoever else had been cast, and it would have been a great setup for a sequel, because it does end with setups for a sequel that would have led to the alien planet, which that would have been interesting. I mean, that was one of the original ideas, talking about where they go from, or maybe even going to Earth. One of the directors who was contemplated during this, when they were talking about this script and going through rewrites, was of course Renny Harlin. Yeah, everyone knows Renny Harlin. You know, the guy that directed Cutthroat Island, one of the biggest bombs of all time, but a film I like. He directed Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Die Hard 2, Cliffhanger, Deep Blue Sea. Yeah, and he does the interview they do with him on the DVD. He gives a pretty good reason why he didn't do it. It's because as the script was going on, he felt he couldn't add anything new to it, which I think if he had probably stuck around through the later scripts, he probably would have changed his mind. Like with the script that we get in the end, even though it wasn't finished, he probably would have changed his mind with that because it was different. More similar to Alien than Aliens, but different, but still. And of course, we got a couple other scripts that rewrote it, and then we got one that was sort of close to it, like a prison planet that involved alien test clones. They don't really go into much detail on that one. Then of course we get one, this is the one they really go into detail on. It's the one that was by Vincent Ward. It's about the wooden monastery, where it was basically these monks live in this wooden planet out in the middle of space because they do not like how the world is, and so they go out there. Not out there as in, yeah man, yeah, we're really out in space. Oh, is that an alien? That'd actually be funny. That actually would be interesting in an alien movie. A stoner, he thinks he's like hallucinating. Yeah man, what are you? Oh man, you got some weird teeth, man. You can imagine, stoner would be funny in an alien movie. In this movie in space in general. Yeah, listen to Dark Side of the Moon while in space. Yeah. Anyway, they are out in space because they want to get away from technology. They believe in all, because they think it's all sinful and stuff, and they only use as much technology as necessary. You know, like kind of I think similar to the Amish, I guess in a way, only kind of a little bit more old school, because they dress like old school Catholic monks. Like when you go to the missions, you see how the friars dress like that. Well, anyway, in it, an escape pod thing from the Sulaco crashes, and Ripley's the only one in there. There's no sign of Newt. And of course, as we find out in that one, that apparently Ripley is pregnant with an alien-human hybrid baby. Now, that, of course, sounds interesting in and of itself, but as it goes on, as they talked about it, one of the most elaborate scenes in the movie is when they set the fields on fire, and as you can guess, the plant's made of wood. Eventually, it spread to the whole building. Now, that actually looked like it would have made a badass scene. You know, fire spreading everywhere. And that would be a cool scene if they ever decide to reuse the wooden planet idea for like its own movie. That would be a cool idea right there. And then again, because of Fox, which I have to say, the one thing that the biggest problem with this movie is Fox's interference. They interfered from the beginning, and they interfered all the way till the end of production, and that is a major problem, and it is the biggest flaw with this movie. It's because with the first film, not a lot of risk, so like, yeah, we'll do it. When we like the storyboards, we'll give you a little bit more money. Second movie, alright, we like your script, you guys, here's your money, go do whatever. Third movie, it's like, you know what? I just realized something. This is the third movie. We're the studio, we'll get in charge. No, we don't want you to film that scene. No, we don't want to go with this script. Yeah, we don't like this guy. He's from New Zealand. He's got these weird ideas, even though we gave Jimmy and Ridley free reign. We're not going to give you free reign. Anyway, they eventually did get a shooting script, which was designed by Walter Hill and David Geller. But even when they hired David Fincher, which this was his first film, even when they hired him on as director, they still did not have a finished script. So basically, David did not have a finished script, and with that, it's actually very surprising that the film even has a coherent story in the end. You would think it would have a lot of plot holes. No. That honor goes to its successor, Alien Resurrection, but I'll get to that when I get to that movie. But it's the theatrical version probably has a couple plot holes, but I prefer the assembly cut, and I'll get to in a little bit why. Now, of course, the plot of the movie is that it's not that long after Aliens. Apparently, somehow, an alien egg got snuck aboard the ship, and this, a lot to say, is one of the few problems I did have with the Gibson script as well, because an alien egg similar got on, but it never explains how. So my only guess is that somehow the Queen brought it on board. That's just my guess. I mean, with AVPR, it shows the Queen earlier in its life cycle, so we're gonna guess maybe once they leave the ovum thing that we saw her attached to an alien, maybe something happens. I don't know. Just up to viewer interpretation. Well, Facehugger gets on board, and while attempting to implant its embryo, it causes an electrical fire with its blood, and Ripley, Hicks, and Newt are ejected into an hold on, I gotta check to see what it's actually called. Let's just call it an escape pod for the heck of it. They are launched out with an escape pod, and they land on the closest planet, which is Fiorina, aka Fury 161, which is, as one of the characters puts it, is one of Weyland-Yutane's backwater worlds. And of course, there's only like not even 30 people on the planet, well, at least where she crashes, and they're there just as custodians, because it used to be like a prison mining facility, and now it only has like a the bare minimum staff it needs. It has 2 superintendents, a doctor, and then the rest of it are crew. And of course, they're all double Y chromosome rapists and murderers. So I guess you could say that Ellen Ripley is going to have a hard time on this planet. No pun intended. But she wakes up, and of course, apparently, during the crash, her companions were killed. And this is the big middle finger, I will admit. This is a big middle finger to fans of the previous film, that if you're going to kill off the main characters, you should at least do it in the story. Like, that's what I would have done if I had this story. I would have had maybe Hicks badly injured in it, because he was already injured to begin with. Maybe he's injured a little bit more, so he can barely do anything. Or maybe like maybe he's confined to a wheelchair or something. Now he would have been a badass guy in a wheelchair with of course he doesn't have a pulse rifle, but if he did, that'd be cool. And then of course Newt, that would have added a little bit more tension, because there's also a child on the planet. And if you're gonna kill her off, have the alien do it in front of Ripley, and then it'll give Ripley a more personal reason to kill that alien. Do it that way. It would have made the story a lot more better, or at least people wouldn't have been as pissed, because her death actually would have meant something to the story. Instead, they just killed off in between movies. Big F you to the fans of the previous film. But anyway, as you can guess, that's not gonna. It's a big shock to Ripley, and of course, slowly she begins to suspect an alien was involved. And of course, we get the infamous autopsy scene, which, from what I understand, it was a lot more gory originally, and they've never really shown footage. I mean, even on the DVD, they don't show the original footage, which is probably for the best, because the way it's edited together already is graphic enough. I mean, you don't really see, like, you see the blade move above where it is, and like you like see shots and stuff, you hear noises, but you don't actually see him cutting in. It's just implied. The only time we really see the body is when he opens it up. But it's one of those things where you don't see, and with sound effects, is creepier than what you actually do see, and it works very well. And in no time we find out there actually is an alien on the planet, and like in the first movie, it starts to pick off the people one by one, like in a slasher movie, until there's only a few people left, and they gotta make a stand against the alien. And at the same time, Weyland-Yutani is coming, and they know the aliens on the planet, so you know they're going to want to get their greedy little hands on it. And of course, as we find out, I don't think this is a shock to anyone, so I don't have any problem spoiling this part, that Ripley had an alien in her. I'm not going to spoil anything else other than that, but it adds another little bit of, adds another dilemma to it, because not only does Ripley have to deal with the alien that's terrorizing the planet, which is a runner alien, which is it's a quadrupedal one, but she also has to deal with the alien inside her. Now, the thing is, like I mentioned before, one of the problems is that Fox got too involved in the movie. One of the other things that they did is that after the movie was complete, or most of it anyway, they were still doing the editing and stuff. They forced a reshoot shot ending, which in the theatrical cut, Ripley struggles with the alien queen, which in the assembly cut she doesn't. Which I will say I prefer the ending that's in the theatrical version, but I prefer overall the assembly cut. And the one major difference is that there's one part of the movie that's cut out completely, and that's them trapping the alien. I'm not saying anything other than that, but it was cut out of the movie basically to shorten the movie, because, okay, they don't have both running times up against each other, so I can't tell. But I think the theatrical cut is like about 100 and something minutes, while the assembly cut I think is like 15 minutes longer. Because that's a big part of the movie, that part where they capture the alien. And the rest of the cuts that they made were just like little minor trims to certain scenes, which unless you've seen both versions you won't really notice them. But I think the stuff that they cut out, like the stuff at the very beginning, makes the opening a lot better, and all the other stuff, and that's the reason I watched the assembly cut a couple times when I first got the set, then I tried to watch the theatrical cut. I only got 30 minutes into the movie and I turned it off. I mean, that's the version of the movie that I grew up watching on VHS. I just couldn't watch it anymore after watching the assembly cut. It's just one of those ones where you watch the original version of the film and you're like, why didn't they release this? Of course, as you can already guess from this that I'm not ranting at least that much, that I don't hate this film. Could they have gone with a different story? Hell yes. Was Fox and the people in charge of Fox assholes for what they did? Not only to Fincher, you know, telling him, oh no, you can't film that. Now screw you, I'm going to go film the scene. And then taking control of the film and, you know, like demanding, oh, you have to cut that, you have to cut that. Yeah, they were. Were they dicks for what they did to the people who were on the film before Fincher and all the Harlan and all the other writers? Yeah, they were. They should have just like, first of all, they should have like first of all, they should have had a finished script. As one of the people on the DVD says, that Alien 3 was a movie that was set to make a release date. Fox should never have done a release date until the movie was finished. That's what you do. Unless, of course, you know a movie's going to be done in time. Know for certain, not think. Then you don't do a release date. Especially since the first teaser trailer lied. But, back on my main point, despite that, for me, it is still an enjoyable movie. Is it the sequel we should have gotten? No. Like I said, out of all the script ideas I've seen, the Gibson script is the sequel we should have gotten. And I'd have to say, if they want to do the money, I would actually like them to do a retcon sequel and like make the Gibson script. It'd be hard to do now, but you could still do it. I mean, you could do it like in a video game. That'd be cool. I mean, even though I already know they are doing, even though that game that's coming out, Colonial Marines, does acknowledge Alien 3, and the good thing about it, though, is it actually is technically going to be part of the Alien canon, so it actually is a canon game. Yay, that means if it's a great story, it's the Alien 3 we always wanted. although we should have gotten. But anyway, my point is, not the movie we should have gotten, but for me, it is an enjoyable movie because I do like the tone of the movie. It has sort of an I wouldn't say overly religious tone, but the religious stuff is in there. And it's kind of hinted at in the score, and the score is a very emotionally driven score. And I love the use of some of the religious stuff in it. The score was done by Elliot Goldenthal. He did a very good job. And despite all the tension Fincher had to go with, he actually did use the camera very creatively. And it shows, I mean, he's a talented filmmaker, and despite all the stuff, this shows how he was. And that's probably one of the reasons I like this film, and it's one of the big drops in quality between this film and the next film, I guess. But I'll talk about that more when we get to that film. The acting in the movie is kind of good. The only problem with that is, since most of the characters are rapists and murderers, you actually want to see the alien kill a bunch of them. I mean, the only one that is really likable is Dylan, and it's the guy played by Charles S. Dutton. Other than that, the only characters you're rooting for are Sigourney and maybe the character of Aaron, played by Ralph Brown. Everyone else, you don't really care if they live or die. I mean, a couple of the inmates try to rape Ripley at one point, so you definitely want to see them get it. Maybe the one played by Pete Postlethwaite, you don't care if he gets killed or not, because he's always a good actor, and his character actually seems likable, and it doesn't really specify what he's in there for. I mean, a couple of them they do, but Charles S. Dutton, he's the only one that you really care about, because he is a rapist and a killer, as he admits, but you could tell by the actions he does that he really has embraced his religion, and he's reformed, I guess you could say. He's one of those rare cases where they actually can be reformed, because in most of the cases rapists aren't reformed, but sometimes they can be. But long shot, but I buy that he is one of those ones, and that's why I actually prefer what happens to him in the movie than in the book. It actually makes more sense with his character. If you've read the novelization and seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But if you've only seen the movie, the book one is probably based more on the original version, and then they reshot it. And Lance Hendrickson, his little brief role in the movie, he does a pretty good job. Would have been better to see him in the Gibson script, like I said before, but nice. And of course, this film had a pretty big budget. It had a $50 million budget compared to the previous ones. I mean, the first film, I believe, had a budget of $8 million, the second one $19 million, this one's $50 million, and most of that was spent when they didn't even, most of that was spent because they didn't have a final script. Granted, this budget of the film we wanted to get probably would have been about that same, would have been probably about $50 million, maybe a little bit higher, but most of it was spent because they were effing around. I mean, 7 of it was spent before the movie even started filming, you know, basically on sets and stuff. But the one thing about it is you can see that most of that money is on the screen. So it's not like where you look at the budget and you're like, where did all that money go? It's a $50 million budget, where is it? Now if it was like $50 million budget and it looks like a Roger Corman movie, you'd be like, where'd all that money go? What, did they pocket the money or spend it on cocaine? Well, it's Fox, so I won't put it past them, but you could see where the money went all to the sets and the alien effects, which the alien effects did garner an Academy Award nomination. It's dated by today's standards, but for the early 90s, the effects aren't really that bad, and when you watch the DVD, it's actually creative how they figured out how to do it. It's interesting too. And of course, that also leads into getting to Fincher, like his creative use of the camera work to show the alien's point of view shot. That's creative, you know, the camera turning, going up on the ceiling, among other stuff. Was creative, and I'm glad he actually went on to get other work. Anyway, what is my rating for Alien 3? This is a hard one to pick, because there's one of two possible ratings. I probably would have to say, for me personally, I know this is the hard part, I know. Honestly, I have to say, after rewatching it, I have to say honestly 4 out of 5. Because I do like the movie, like I said. It's not the sequel we should have gotten, and also because of a few minor things like the little plot hole at the beginning, and then of course Fox effing around. That's what contribute, and of course because of them, the movie kind of given this to the fans of the previous 2 movies. But other than that, I find the movie to be an enjoyable film. I mean, I like the tone of the movie, everything, and I don't really mind the ending. Could, like I said, wish it was a different film. film altogether, but for the film we got, I don't mind it.